All right, guys, welcome to episode 8 of the Legacy Warrior podcast, where we help you become the best version of yourself and elevate your legacy using the exact tools we use to transform ours. I am here with my partner in crime, Stephanie McKinley.
Hey, everybody. You're in for a treat today.
And we are really excited to bring you our guest today, somebody who's a dear friend of both of ours, someone who I met probably about 18 months ago, and who I have so much respect for, not only because she just shows up congruent and authentically herself, but just her heart for service and how she's been able to take her, her story, turn it triumphant, and not only do that for herself, but teach people to do the same thing through speaking, through master classes, through coaching. It's just been such a beautiful journey that we're going to dig into today with our guest, Tara Murney. What's going on, Tara?
What's up, guys? I'm so excited to get this ball rolling.
Awesome. Okay, so I always like to read your guys' bio because you deserve the love when you come on here to the Legacy Warrior podcast, especially when someone like you, who is the epitome of being a legacy warrior, is joining us and our audience today. So Tara is an emotional intelligence education consultant, a #1, you heard me, best-selling author, and a nationally recognized, she's been nationally recognized for her EI embodiment coaching. What I love is that she's energetic, she's passionate, and most importantly, she creates an experience as a speaker. And she has over 10 years of experience doing this. And what's really cool is because of all the work that she does and the way that she shows up consistently, she recently was appointed as the global head of prison reform for the G100 because of her work around emotional intelligence. And so I cannot wait. Right. I cannot wait for her to just pour her journey of life and the lessons that she's learned into you guys to help you gain more clarity and focus, and more importantly, just fulfillment, peace, and happiness that she's done for herself, but more importantly, that she can help you do for yourself. So, Tara, I'm so excited to have you here. What's up, girl? You ready? You ready to get this party started?
I've told you before, I'm going to have you introduce me everywhere that I go. If I'm speaking on stages, you're going to come as my little sidekick because you always do the most wonderful introductions. And so I'm super grateful to be here, and thank you both for the opportunity. We've shared many stages together, and I know we always have these wonderful, beautiful, organic conversations. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
We're so excited to have you on, Tara, today.
Thanks,
because
Steph.
She really is a true embodiment of what a legacy warrior is to us. And she is one of those people that just has an incredible story. And I'm just so proud of her because it takes real courage to share and be this vulnerable and share this type of story with everyone out there. And she turns it into, she's turned that pain into real purpose and serving others. And so just want to say, so proud of you. And totally look up to you for that courage and that vulnerability.
Thanks, Mama Bear.
Well, what's really cool and what I love about you, Tara, is you've been able to embrace the pain of your past. And like I like to say, use it as rocket fuel for your future.
Right.
I think it's really powerful when you meet somebody with a story like yours, and through your story, you found empowerment instead of being drowned by the reality of the things that have happened. Because of what's happened, you became the person that you are today, which is just, for me, an amazing friend, for Stephanie, amazing friend, but so much power that you provide into this world. And so we can't get to the triumph without understanding the journey a little bit. So why don't you take some time and talk to us about this pain that you've turned into purpose to become triumphant to now helping other people do the same?
Amazing. Okay. So I just want to put a disclaimer out there. I'm not a therapist, right? And so for anybody who's really experienced trauma or like severe trauma, it's always advisable that you get professional help. My thoughts and my story are solely based on my experiences only. And, I don't claim to have some secret potion or magic formula that you're just going to take and it's simply going to go away. But my story is deeply woven in a lot of trauma, choices that I had made. And it really started at the age of 14. You guys are both aware of, my short story. I'll give you the Coles notes, but I was with a very good friend of mine, and we were walking in a local plaza, and we're just young. We're 14. We're naive. We're just doing our thing. And at the time when we were walking, a Jeep had driven by us, and inside the Jeep were two gentlemen and a puppy. And I clearly remember saying, "Oh, look at the puppy." And those 5 words completely changed the direction or the course of my journey for the next couple of years. Those gentlemen turned around and, kind of wooed us with their charisma and everything, and, invited us to this party. And, we just thought we were old enough and experienced enough. We're naive. And we went, and the next couple of years were absolutely horrible and hell for me. I was branded. And if you know anybody or why people who traffic girls brand them, it's so that if they are lost or missing, they are returned to their proper owner. And actually, the girl that I was with, who was one of my very, very good friends, I actually never did see her the day after that day. I've looked for her on Facebook. I've looked for her on all social media platforms. I have no idea what happened to her. But the next couple years were very traumatic. And I did not tell anybody. Not my parents, not my friends, and nobody knew. And throughout that whole process, obviously, I had no self-worth, no self-love. Yeah. And I think when we go through traumatic experiences in life, we always ask, like, God, why us, right? And I could not understand for the life of me why this would happen to me, because I was the little girl. If you'd ask my parents when I was really, really young, I'd pick up things when people dropped them. I'd hold doors for people. I just thought I was a great human being. I have a good heart. Like, why is this happening? And throughout all of this process, I went through years of struggle, not because, basically because I didn't have anybody to talk to. So what I did was I journaled. And while you're very familiar with the story, and I think you are too, Steph, I carried like 26 journals in my possession. I didn't believe in traditional therapy at the time, because at the age of 15, my mother was involved in a horrific accident, which she had lodged herself under a vehicle, and then the vehicle and her went across the parking lot. She had physical injuries, but she also smacked her head, and they diagnosed her with DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. So my beautiful Cancerian mom, I mean, the best mom in the world, like tons of hugs and kisses, would always cook and bake, and just such a beautiful human being. I'm very, very blessed to have a mother like her. Well, now had 30 plus personalities. And so it was just trauma after trauma after trauma. My father became a very angry human being. I love my father to pieces. But at that time, if I look back in hindsight, we can understand that, this man was now taking care of a sick wife, 2 children, working a full-time job, was now the cooker, the cleaner, the banker. Like, he was just, I think he was overwhelmed. And so I learned very quickly that I could not even tell him what was happening, right? Because he was very angry. So I just wrote in all of my journals. They were my own personal, like, little toolkit of therapy. And then after that, I literally went from one bad relationship to the next. Because when you come from a place of having no self-love and no self-worth, you actually attract everything that you're not supposed to attract in your life. So I went through cycles and cycles of horrible boyfriends, and just thought, this is what life is supposed to be. And this is what I deserve. And it's not going to get any better. And then I met the man of my dreams, who is the father of my children. And again, I was locked in a cycle for 11 years of just staring at myself in the mirror and looking at this like fractured version of who Tara was. And I was so tired of being tired. And I think people who go through a lot of trauma are just so tired of being tired. And that's why they have, suicide ideations, and just, they're just tired. They don't actually want to give up on life. They just want the pain to stop. Yeah. And I remember one day sitting down with a doctor, and we were reading through my journals, because they had diagnosed me with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, high functioning anxiety, and clinical depression, told me I'd be on meds for the rest of my life. And there was this little fire in my veins, if you want to call it magic, that was just like, no. I'm creator. I get to choose, and I choose to work on myself. And that set me on a whole new path of self-discovery. And as we were reading all of my entries, we had come to the conclusion that I had actually tried to take my life 18 different times. And for me, I looked back in reflection. I was like, wow, that is 18 times I almost gave up on myself. And to look at myself today and the things that I have accomplished, the beautiful connections with human beings like yourselves, like what a shame that would have been. And so for anybody who's listening, I want them to know that there is an alternative. There's a wonderful end to the story, and that we are creator, and that we get to choose how it ends, actually.
Go ahead.
Well, there's so much to that story. We have to go back and talk about a few things there. First, you talked about how these young men approached you and they had a puppy. Yeah. And I just have to address that because I know there's so many... This happens every day in our everyday lives, and we don't even realize how slick these people are, and that they prey on naive children, and they do it in that way. And you said they were charming, and they used a puppy, and sometimes they use candy, or they use something they know children will love to lure them in. Yep. And, you know, we have to be really careful in teaching our children that they have to use caution when talking to any adult like that approaches them and they're not, you know, they're on their own. And so I guess what else could you maybe share that would be a good indicator for someone to pay attention to warn their children about, or warn even women or men that, you know, someone might use to bring you in like that?
Absolutely. I think that's a very, very important question, and it's something that we need to talk about daily. So I'm actually a volunteer for it's it's Operation Underground Railroad. If anybody's familiar with it, they're the greatest and largest anti-human and trafficking organization in the world. And we've had many discussions about this. And keep in mind, I was 14. I didn't have the guidance, or I didn't have, and it's no one's fault. It's not my parents' fault. Just nobody told me to be aware of these things. And it happens right under our noses in the greatest communities around you, where people think that it's not happening. It is happening. For example, in our local mall here, and I live in quite a beautiful community, middle class, but it's happening in the mall. They're setting up kiosks, and in the kiosks, they're selling hair straighteners, because what do young girls want? They want makeup, they want hair straighteners, and their little ploy was if you buy one, you can come to my house and pick up the other for free. And I just happened to be at the mall that day with my daughter, who was, you know, she didn't want me around her and her friends. So I said, no problem. You go one way in the mall, I'll go in the other direction. I'll meet you in the food court. And upon meeting her in the food court, she had shared what this gentleman had said to her. And I said, really? Now, I come from experience. I can see what that looks like, which most people would overlook at, oh, that's just nice. That's generous. And, you know, I don't have enough on stock. So maybe if you just come by my house, no problem. Here, I'll give you one. But it's so much more than that. And I went over to him. I introduced myself, and right away, the story changed. I reached out to our local police department. I happened to know one of the sergeants there, and they shut that down in seconds. And it wasn't just our mall. It was happening. It was happening in a bunch of them all over Ontario. And so it happens right under our noses as parents. And I don't suggest that you bubble wrap your children. I actually think it's a huge disservice to them and their gifts. But what I do recommend you do is have open conversations with your children. My youngest is 12. We have these conversations, because if you don't have them, they're not aware. It's not their fault. They're not aware. And the greatest way that we can protect them is just by having these conversations with them.
Yeah, I love what you said there too, because I think silence is complicity.
Absolutely.
And it would have been really easy for you to say, oh no, and just have a conversation with your daughter and walk out of there. Yeah. But because of your experiences and the fact that you can see that major red flag of what could progress from there, you took action. And I want people to know we have to be action takers in this life. Yes. We can't just sit back and let these things happen because we feel uncomfortable in these moments. There's so much trafficking happening. There's so much abuse happening in homes. And people don't say anything, but meanwhile, our kids are suffering. Yeah. Children are suffering out there, and they become hurt adults who go out and hurt other people. If we're going to break generational cycles, it starts in our own home.
That's right.
By working on ourselves. But it also has to be us building enough awareness and having the courage to actually say something versus just being silent. And I want to mention one more thing. I'm curious your thoughts on this now as an adult, Tara. So many people will think, oh, you were 14, you were 15, you were 16 when you were being trafficked. And why didn't you say something? Mm-hmm. There's kids, like I had an opportunity through my abuse to say something. And I didn't because I was scared. I was fearful of the judgment. I was scared what might happen to me. I was scared of getting beat. I was scared. There were so many things I was scared of that kept me in paralysis of actually being able to speak my truth, which I talk about in episode 2 on healing from trauma is a big, important piece. There's so many things that kept me from speaking my truth until I was 16 and figured out, oh man, I did a little bit of it. And I saw the result was positive. And then it started this healing journey for me. So if you go back, especially if we end up having, because I've had high school kids read my book. I've had high school kids reach out, get inspired by what we're doing. There's going to be somebody, whether it's an adult or whether it's a teenager listening to this at some point. What would you tell that person who's paralyzed by the fear, who really needs to be able to speak their truth to get themselves out of a situation that they're in, like you probably wished you would have did until you actually had the courage to do it at some point?
Absolutely. Well, I think everybody, first and foremost, everybody's experience is very different and the circumstances are very different. So, for example, in my case, they learned very quickly that I was very tenacious. I was very hard to control. And so they just subdued me actually with cocaine, which I unfortunately developed a horrible cocaine addiction to. But they also threatened me. They knew my address. They knew my parents' names. They knew where they worked. And so that incited a lot of fear because I love my parents. I don't want anything to happen. But on top of that, with all of this comes a lot of shame. And with trauma comes shame, and shame equals blame. And when we start to do that, we blame ourselves. We blame other people, right? We deflect from what's really going on. And I think that is actually the root of a lot of it. It's the shame. And the shame keeps us silent. And if I had have known what I know today, looking back in hindsight, I would have said something. I really would have. Number one, it would have stopped a lot earlier. Who knows what the end result would have been. But I didn't want to put my parents also in a position because I knew my dad. My dad is kind of like, go kill them all kind of thing. You know what I mean? And he was already going through a lot as it was. And I was petrified, actually, to be honest with you, that he wouldn't believe me. Because there were many times where I would be gone for months, weeks, and then there'd be a time when I'd come home. It was the most bizarre thing ever. And I just felt like he had too much on his plate. But if I look back, I wish I had said something. And I think having an open, clear line of communication with your children makes all the difference. We didn't have that. And so maybe if we had had that, I would have been able to talk to him. So this is, again, goes back to have that communication with your children, have that talk, that open line of communication, so that they know that they can come to you, that there is no shame, there is no blame, right? And so I would start there and remove yourself from the shame, which is, one of the hardest things to do. But that's actually the root of most of it.
I want to mention one thing for the dads out there listening, especially because I'm a dad.
Yeah.
And I would tell my kids, if anybody ever hurt you, and we had those candid discussions when a kid would get kidnapped they would talk about it on TV. I would show my daughters that when they were younger to bring awareness to them.
Yes.
And not allow them to stay in that naive space because the world isn't naive. Yeah. But I would also say I would chop somebody up and put them in the woods if they ever hurt them. And I meant it. But sometimes as dads, we're saying those things which we feel like will make our children feel empowered, but it really makes them scared that you would go really do that, because that's what we feel, men, right?
Yeah.
And mothers too, but that you would go do that and then they wouldn't have their dad anymore.
That's right.
So it's really finding the balance in the conversation about just the open dialogue, like Tara just talked about, keeping the line of communication open where children don't feel judged, where they know that they're not going to get in trouble, where they can really come to you with anything and you're going to have open arms and an open heart for what they're going to talk about. And as parents, we got to put our own experiences and triggers aside for the betterment of our children. Better yet, we need to heal them. Yeah. But if they're not healed at the moment, put them aside so that we can really have open dialogue with our kids based upon their experiences, not the ones we want them to live, the ones that are actually happening. It's taken, I think I still struggle with that a little bit as a dad, but it's taken me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah. And you know, what's also important too, Walt, is that we teach them that they need to tell somebody. Doesn't matter who. I wish I had have known that. I would have told, you know, how many opportunities I had to say something to a neighbor, to a teacher, to just somebody walking by on the street. Like I've gone to places with them where they're standing right beside me in a restaurant or in a building, and I could have said something and I didn't. I was petrified, you know. And also, like I said at the beginning of this, it all is really based on your circumstance and your own experience, because I was so afraid of what my dad would do, because he would do something like you just said, that not only I've lost my mother because she's very sick. Now I'm going to lose my father. And so that put a lot of pressure on me to just stay quiet and comply. And this is a multi-trillion-dollar problem, guys. This is like, it is ridiculous. If you actually dive into it, do some research, look up our, it is a massive problem, and it is everywhere. It's not in third world countries like we all think it is. It's happening right in the United States. It's happening right here in Canada. It's right under your nose. You
know, you just said something that made me think, because Walt and I were in the airport not too long ago, actually, and he saw a girl. He thought, I don't know, there was something off, that he felt like she looked too young to be with the man that she was with. And he was like, I don't know, I just feel like there's something wrong in that situation. I feel like I need to go. And so I can't remember what happened, but I think you tried to go find, or you tried to follow them so that he could find
like an official to intervene.
And then we lost them. But I was just wondering if there's anything you can say, because you mentioned like sometimes they were standing right there with you. Like, what would be some things that we could recognize, maybe that there is an off situation and maybe we should step in? Or I don't know, is there signs that we could see? Because I know for him, I think it was just like he thought the girl was too young.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that she looked a little like her, I don't know, maybe her facial expressions were showing like she didn't want to be there.
It was the intuition I had in the moment. And Tara, I know that you teach and talk about intuition a lot. So talk about that intuition and that gut feel that you get sometimes, and then the ability to intervene.
So important. I'm so glad you asked that, Steph. So it happens so much around us, but we're so busy. We're so busy focusing on what we got to do tomorrow and our own like little experience of what's happening in front of us, that we're not attuned to it. We all have this beautiful navigation system, our GPS. It's our intuition. And I know for a fact, because I know you well enough, Walt, that your intuition knew something was wrong. There are young children that travel with, you know, their older uncles and their fathers and whatever, but you can really tell. And here's a couple signs. And because I'm trained, I really noticed this on top of my own journey. When their body language tells a different story from what the reality looks like, that's a huge indication. Your intuition will tell you. It'll be like a yes or a no, and it's pretty concrete and it's pretty loud. Trust your gut always. Another huge indication is these girls are usually well-dressed. They've got makeup on, they got jewelry on, they're well taken care of. They're not usually in scrubs. They're not usually dressed down. Like they're like almost like a prized possession to these gentlemen. And so if you see younger girls coming into a hotel or through an airport, and it happens a lot at the airport, except the fact that they're trained to see that stuff. But as passengers or just civilians coming in, we wouldn't notice unless your intuition said so. But these girls, these young girls are usually well dressed, or they're carrying like a Gucci bag, or like they're wearing phenomenal earrings and they're like 13 and 12. Like these little things combined with their body language will tell you right away that something is off. And if you feel something is off, say something. Maybe you're wrong. You could be wrong. But what if you're right? You just completely saved that child's life. Because the trauma usually that stems from human and sex trafficking is so deeply rooted. Some people never, ever, ever get out of it. I'm lucky. I am, but I did a lot of work to do that. Some people just give up. And so I think it's our responsibility as other human beings on this planet is to be aware and to be the voice when these children don't have a voice because they are petrified.
I love that. I think what you said is really important. And I think people need to realize, if you go say something, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to piss that girl's dad off.
Oh, well.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like
he should be grateful. He should be grateful.
Right. And ultimately they probably would be. But that's literally the worst that's going to happen is you're going to piss somebody off. The best thing that's going to happen is you potentially save somebody's life. Yeah. So
absolutely.
I think, there's so much to your journey that we could sit and do 10 episodes on that, but let's keep moving on. I think you said something at the beginning where you talked about repeating the generational cycles a little bit in your marriage that you had for 11 years. And I want to get to your marriage now and how wonderful your husband is. And we're going to get there in that journey, but talk about that. Talk about how that self-worth, lack of self-worth, confidence, the imposter syndrome, the lack of self-love really put you in a position where you didn't recognize, or maybe you just bypassed some of the red flags that put you in the position in your relationship that you were in.
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest things I've ever learned along this journey, and I've learned a lot actually, but probably the most important thing for me was learning how to set boundaries for myself. Because I always thought of boundaries as just kind of selfish and really it wasn't something I fully understood until I started to implement them. And looking back, especially in the past relationship with my children's father, if I had to put more boundaries in place, I had porous boundaries. And I think it's important for your viewers and your listeners to understand there's different types of boundaries, and setting boundaries is really hard for people because they don't understand there's different types, right? We have very porous boundaries, and you can think of a house with a fenced in yard, the gate is open and everybody's just coming and going as they please. They say what they want. You're the yes person, you become a people pleaser, and that's not very healthy. And then we have rigid boundaries, which are very much like the house again. It's fenced in, except this time the gate is closed, and the gate and the fence are solidified way deep in the ground, and they're super high. So you're not letting anybody in. And that's not healthy either, because what you do is you lose the opportunity for connections, deep connections with other human beings. You lose the opportunity for growth and for learning and for failure, actually, which is the greatest thing, is the growth that comes out of failure. So this isn't healthy either. What you need is a boundary that's healthy, where you get to choose whether to keep that gate open and closed, right? And you got to learn to respect your no. And one of my very good friends, her name is Lolita Walker, this is her line. It's respect your no. And just remember that every time that you say yes to someone else or to everybody around you, including your family, which is the hardest, right, for us to set boundaries, you're actually saying no to yourself. And when you say no to yourself, you are robbing yourself of joy and fulfillment and purpose. And so I really need people to change their perspective of that. And when I started to set up these healthy boundaries, I just became more attuned to my gift. I became more attuned to shifting my perspective in life. And I've cultivated some of the most healthy and phenomenal relationships with people across this planet. So boundaries was probably the number one thing that I've learned. And through the relationship that I have now, he's the most incredible human being. And funny enough, I've known him since I was 18. And I think the reason why we're so great is we really have a foundation of friendship. I've known him so long. I've watched his boys grow up. He's watched my children grow up, that we understood each other's experiences. We've seen each other in our own trauma. He's had trauma. I've had trauma. And communication for us without judgment, right, just has been the foundation and the epitome of everything in our relationship. And we challenge each other because we all have different experiences in life. And we do. Our window of perception is very different, even yours and mine, sorry. It's very, very different. And if you can listen to your partner with no judgment and listen not to respond or to reply, but just to listen and come from a place of empathy and self-awareness and understand what they're going through and what they're trying to convey, it makes a massive difference in your relationship. And luckily enough, I have that.
That's amazing. Yeah. I just want to reiterate for the listeners that if you notice, she talked about how when she came out of the trafficking, she went into a relationship that was unhealthy. It was a narcissist, and he took advantage of her, and she learned that she had to have boundaries. And then she, from there, moved to a healthy relationship where that person did respect her boundaries, and he did listen to her, and not to tell her how to be, but just to listen to how she was in that moment. And that's really, really important. And you also mentioned previously that you journaled your feelings. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit too, because it's kind of like our previous episode where we talked about how you talk to yourself and things like that, and speaking your truth. And for you, you said you were too young. You didn't have money to go to therapy, and you weren't ready for that, but you did journal your feelings. And that's a great way to get out that stuff that is sitting inside that's poisoning your soul. You can still let it out in a journal that's helpful to get that out. And I just wonder if you have any other tips for those out there that are still in their trauma, or, they're trying to heal. What other ways can they get those feelings out and help themselves heal?
Amazing. Well, such a good question. So I personally chose to journal. And like I had said at the very beginning of this, like, there are some amazing therapists out there. There are people, most therapists come from a place of service in their heart. They're really there to help you through this. And so whatever is best for you, because not all modalities work. Like, if I give you a toolbox full of different modalities, and we've discussed this before, right, on other platforms, not every, modality in that toolbox is for everybody. But journaling has this beautiful component to it where, like, we are driven by our emotions as human beings, right? And if we're bottling them all up and we're not expressing them, right? We don't witness them, we don't release them. Well, it's very much like a kettle on the stove, and it gets to a point where it's just going to explode, right? And journaling is a form of releasing. So you get down, it's kind of like a brain dump, like a mind dump, right? We're releasing all of our thoughts, all of our feelings and emotions onto paper. And what happens is you can actually start to connect things, right? Now, the thing is, and I'm going to unpack this as clearly as I can for you guys. So this is what changed my entire life. And if just one listener has an aha moment, then this is a great podcast, which I already know it is. The past is so deceiving, right? Whatever has happened to you, your experiences, your accomplishments, whatever that is, it's really hard for us as human beings to kind of separate what has happened to us from who we are, right? And actually, many of our behavioral patterns that we choose to implement in our daily lives stem from what we've experienced. And I need everybody to just kind of hit the restart button for a minute. Your past is not who you are, number one. It does not define you. You're not your mistakes. You're not your accidents. And you definitely aren't broken. If I hear one more person say you're broken, that's not true. You're actually becoming. And what happens is you're not broken. You're just in pain. And pain is a great motivator. Sometimes it'll keep you right where you are. But most of the time, if you look at what it's trying to do, it's trying to get you to move. It's so hurtful and so painful that you need a change. And that's exactly what happened to me. I realized that my past is actually just an illusion. It doesn't even exist anymore. Only the memories that we've collected, right? Which is really just collected information. I can't go back. I can't change it. I can't touch it. All I can do is think about it. And our thoughts actually is what stops us. It's what limits us in life. And so what I stopped doing was I stopped linking who I was to my past. And I just accepted it for what it was. I accepted everything that happened, no matter how unpleasant it was or how hurtful it was. But I just refused to accept that I'd be affected by it any longer. And journaling was my way out of it. I also did a lot of meditation and Hakomi, and I really fell into Buddhism, actually. And I grew up as a Roman Catholic. And this is not for any religious people in here. Everybody has their own denomination. They believe in what they believe in. But I really wanted to focus on self. And I knew this was going to be a spiritual journey, right? Life impacts all of us very, very different. And I had said before, we have this window of perception and we just can't seem to separate the two. And there's like this gap in between reality and what we expect our life to be. And I had to really go back on the self-discovery journey, figure out what my values were, figure out the things that light me up. And we can all find this. All we have to do is go back to our childhood, right? And then I had to kind of reconstruct my objective of reality. And then that forever changed my divine spiritual relationship, right? And how I started to see that everything is connected. It's this big scope of experience, right? There's just this oneness around all of us. And it's actually, we're just experiencing life through us. We always hear that saying, you know, life didn't happen to you, it's happening from you. Well, it is happening through you. And if I look at the foundation of who we are as human beings, are like the foundation of our DNA, well, think about this. We're carbon, we're nitrogen. What else are we? We're sulfur, we're hydrogen and oxygen, right? Carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, oxygen, and hydrogen. Well, that's pretty magical. Well, guess what? The solar system is made up of the exact same thing. And what's happened is our DNA is what allows us to sit right here on Zoom in physical form, right? In light. We're always talking about light workers in this world, right? We have this spectrum of light that comes out of us. And the most craziest thing of all, and I'm deeply rooted in neuroscience, and I could sit here all day and talk about just this topic alone. But when you understand that we emit this light frequency and we all have a unique signature to it, yours and Steph's are very, very different. It might be similar, but it's very, very different. There's one person in the world that carries that same spectrum. And the absorption of that light is actually reflected back to us in what we call the universe. And so what I mean by all of this, without confusing anybody, is we actually are the creator of our experiences. And a lot of people might find that really challenging, be like, what are you talking about, Tara? You're telling me that I actually, I wanted that trauma to happen. Well, we are creator and we get to choose our path. I could have chose to say something. I could have chose not to stay in victimhood as long as I did. I could have chose not to judge as many people as I did. And because I learned a long, long time ago, I'm only attracting more of what I don't want. The more I judge, the more I'm attracting this, right? And when we understand that when we come from a place of shame, what happens is most of us that are in trauma and we're deeply rooted in shame, what do? We kind of cut off that part of us, right? And we pretend it's not part of us. And then we start blaming people. And when we blame, we deflect. And the things actually that we don't like in ourselves is actually the thing that we don't like in ourselves. And when you start to journal, you start to see all this interconnectedness that I'm talking about. Everything is connected, from your choices, all of that stuff. We create these personas of who we are, right? And actually the Latin word for persona is mask. And did we not just come through COVID where everybody is wearing a mask? And some people realize this mask is not who I am, and they took them off. Some people actually just fell in love with their masks and keep them on all day long.
Driving in a car by themselves.
Right? It happens here in Canada too. But we're only here, guys. You're not here to be rich or successful. You're here for experiences. And we get to choose those experiences. We are given the freedom to love our life and our experiences. And if we don't change the cycle of what we're going through, guess what's going to happen? That universe of ours is very subservient. It's very loyal, but it's very neutral. It's only going to respond to what you order. You and I talk about this all the time. Well, you get what you order in life. My second book, that is a chapter of my book. It's called You Get What You Order. If you are in victimhood all the time, and you and I both know this very, very well, if you are in victimhood all the time, well, guess what happens? And you're talking about it all the time. You're going to keep getting more victimhood. You're going to keep getting more of what you don't want. And so what you need to do is understand that even your unconscious choices, right? There are no coincidences in life. They just come from even our unconscious choices. There's no randomness. It's you. You are choosing to experience what you are in life. Like, are you wealthy and successful because you worked hard? Probably. But you chose that, right? And this whole life experience is to love every aspect of it, even the hard, even the painful moments, because that's actually where your gifts are found, right? Well, I think, go ahead, sweetheart, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think I want to edify some of the stuff that you just talked about, because I think it's super important. You know, at the beginning, for me, I say your history does not define your legacy.
No.
And I think that that's so huge. Like, we are not our trauma, but we are who we are because of our experiences. And that's what Tara's unpacking here is you do have a choice. Like, you can be what you are from your experiences and be miserable and in a victim mindset and not realize the resilience and the fighter and the warrior that's within. Or you can use your story to not only empower you and where you're headed in life, but to also teach other people how to empower themselves. And maybe you don't do it on a podcast or a book or do all the things that we do. Maybe you actually just do it to help the one person that needed your story, that didn't need Tara's story or my story or Stephanie's story. They needed yours. And I think it's really important that we have to realize as human beings, growth is in the pain. So although in the moment, the pain doesn't feel great, if we start embracing the pain as an opportunity to up-level ourselves in our life, to really maximize our potential as human beings, and we focus our attention there, then we're going to come out of that season of growth, having been a better person, like stronger relationships, feeling better about ourselves. Like there's so many advantages, but like Tara talked about, you have the choice. You get to pick. So why would you pick the one that keeps you in comfortable misery instead of picking the one that can help you grow? And that's why we do this podcast. That's why we had Tara on, because as you build the self-awareness, and I want to transition to self-awareness a little bit. When you build the self-awareness within you, you can start to make conscious choices about where you're going. And then you can be the person that you've always been meant to be. We're here to help you build the self-awareness. So I think, Tara, you talk about self-awareness and emotional intelligence. It's your jam. It's what you do. I think it's why you and Stephanie get along so well, too, because that's her jam. It's what she does.
I'm just over here like, yes.
So talk a little bit about the self-awareness or the choices that come with self-awareness, and how maybe if you aren't self-aware in certain aspects, how can you gain additional clarity so that you can start making the choices to move you forward?
Amazing. Great question. So through this process, and even me journaling, this is how I really became self-aware, right? This journey was really a self-discovery. Like, why am I feeling like that? See, our emotions, like I said, are drivers, but they're actually our greatest allies. They are showing you something at a root level. But what the problem is that most of us, we don't like feeling like that. It's uncomfortable, right? Like, who wants to sit through some of those emotions? So what we do is we bury grief. We bury shame. We bury all those low vibrating emotions. And you wonder why you're feeling so blah. It's because you're vibrating so low, because you just keep burying it. It's like stacked up. It's like put in a knapsack that you're carrying around every single day of your life. Can't see the knapsack. Can't figure out why you feel so heavy and so blah. That's why. When I was journaling, I started to really say, well, where is this, lack of self-love coming from? Why don't I feel worthy? And when I started to unpack that, I became very self-aware of the choices I had made, or even our beliefs. We've talked about this a gazillion times, but I can tell you that 99% of the beliefs that you have, number one, are not true. And number two, they don't even belong to you. They're things that you have heard as a child. Maybe you were sitting in the dining room, your parents were in the kitchen, and they were talking about whatever topic it was, and you believe that to be true because your parents said it. That doesn't make it factual, but you've actually indoctrinated this, and you've built a belief system on a bunch of bull crap. Like, it's not even true. So I really went back and started to kind of question my beliefs. And the greatest way to know if a belief is true or not is become the proof seeker. Is that true? Is it factual? And when I went through that journey, I realized, oh my God, like I'm harboring stuff that's not even mine, or it's not even true. It's not even factual. And so I had to rebuild that and become very self-aware of the things that I was listening to, how I was responding to other people. Now, there is a plethora of literature out there on self-awareness. And if anybody would like to connect with me offline on any social media platform, I don't charge for that. You want to have a conversation? I'll have a conversation. I'll show you how you can really just take little steps. One of the greatest ones that I can share here today is start to disconnect from things around you. Turn off the social media, turn off the news, and sit with yourself. Just even 5 minutes and journal, just mind dump, like just dump it all out on the paper, write down some goals. What lights you up? Like, let's just take a little bit of a journey on self-discovery, because there are the keys to help you overcome a lot of the things that are keeping you very stuck and limited.
Yeah, something you said that is sticking with me right now is that you said that through journaling, you started recognizing that the pain, some of the pain stuff, you started to ask yourself the question. That's something I want the listeners to take away is start paying attention to when you feel your pain and start asking yourself some of these questions, like, where is this coming from? Where is this really rooted in? Because oftentimes we get triggered by something and we react, and and we just go with that, and we never really stop and have some self-reflection, like, why did that trigger me? Why am I so upset? Because often it's not whatever petty thing had happened that triggered you. It's usually much deeper.
Yes.
And like you said, so I love that you should start writing that down. Start writing down when you got triggered, what made you triggered, and the feelings that you were feeling at that time, because it starts making you have that self-reflection like she's talking about.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So this leads us into, we wanted to get to what are your 4 keys that you want to leave everybody with today?
Amazing. Okay, so hold on. We're just going to piggyback for 1 second. I want something you said because it's really important, and I want your audience to hear this. Pain is a beautiful thing. And people are like, what, Tara? But it is. It is the greatest ally, and your triggers are too. If I hear one more person say trigger warning, I'm going to lose my mind. Because actually, when we say trigger warning, actually there's science on this, and there's a lot of literature. Actually, when you say trigger warning, you actually incite more overwhelm and anxiety in people. But triggers are our allies, guys. Yes. They are showing you. It's not a Band-Aid solution. Like, it is showing you the root. You want to have a beautiful garden and cultivate this beautiful life. Well, you better start ripping out the roots that shouldn't be there. And the way or the path to that is actually through your triggers and through your pain. So I'm so glad that you said that. Now, as for the 4 keys, you guys know I have a lot of keys, but if I can leave your listeners with anything, something that they could really just take away today, simple little things. I want you, number 1, to stop comparing yourself, right? I think the more that you compare yourselves to others, right? Or what happens is the more you start to experience more of what you don't want in your life. We are all on a different journey, and not one single experience is shared with another person on this planet, the exact same experience. They're all very, very different. And comparison, we know, is the greatest thief of joy. I do not remember who said that, but it is quoted somewhere. The second one is
I'm probably took it from somebody, but that's my favorite.
I love it. I love it because it is the greatest thief of joy. Like, we are not the same. We might have parallels in our life and our outlook, right, in our journeys, but our experiences, all 3 of us, are very different, even from how we grew up to how we look at life. And so you need to stop comparing yourself. Number 2 is start to surround yourself with, like, good people. Like, I'm talking the people who are doing more deposits than withdrawals in your life in terms of energy. Like, I'm talking, you need to be around the people that mention your name in a room of opportunities when you're not even there. You need to be around the people that challenge you to move beyond your comfort zone, that challenge your thinking, that challenge you, like, just challenge you. Those are my favorite kind of people. And so I always ask people every month, every couple of months, reflect at who's at your table, because it makes a difference. Number 3 is I want you to start being kind to yourself. This was something I had to learn to do, which was really hard to do, especially when you don't have self-worth. Self-compassion is one of the most important things. And when we are compassionate with self, we are then compassionate with other people. We come from a place of empathy, which is a component of emotional intelligence. It's, being able to sit back and having enough compassion to listen to other people and understand where they're coming from. Our stories are what bind us as human beings, right? Number 4 is obviously, I need you to start to focus on your verbiage with yourself, your positive self-talk, if you want to call it that, because words matter. There are some famous studies out there. Dr. I think it's Komodo or something like that. Yeah, he did a study on the power of words with water and with plants. And it's incredible to watch, actually, when you speak life and love into these plants, they grow. When you speak hateful words and heavy words, they actually die. And so if that can happen to a plant, what do you think can happen to yourself? So even little things, like, I don't like the term imposter syndrome. Syndrome is actually not even recognized in the DSM. It's the word syndrome we automatically associate with being like, at a deficit. So if you're saying that you have imposter syndrome, well, you're already losing the battle because you think there's something wrong with you, right? I like to refer to it as the inner critic. And that inner critic actually is a great friend as well, because it's only trying to keep you safe. But when you look in the mirror, stop saying horrible things about yourself. Maybe it's been indoctrinated from school or from your family, or you just went through a fight with somebody, or you had a horrible relationship with another human being, that does not mean anything. That is their perspective. Remember the window of perception? It's very, very different. So those would be the first four. And the fourth being the third is probably the hardest, the self-compassion, because with self-compassion comes your key, which is forgiveness.
Yep.
Forgiveness is the final act of love, guys. I had to learn to forgive all of the people, including the gentleman who did horrible things to me. I've had to learn to forgive the father of my children, my father. I've had to learn to forgive a lot of people, but the hardest was I had to learn to forgive myself. Yep. And those are something that you can probably start with. But it's a journey. It's not going to happen. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and everything's going to be beautiful and magical. It's a journey. We're here with no destination, guys. It's a journey of life. And when you start to show up in a higher version of self, a better self, which we talk about all the time, Walt, you're going to start to see synchronicities that start to happen in your life. I said there was no coincidence, but there are synchronicities. And this came through a meditation. Well, you will appreciate this, and so will you, Steph. When I started to see things show up in my life, like 11:11, I'd wake up every morning at the same time. I realized that it's a signature of my higher self, my best self, the core self, not the shell self that we're all walking around with our mask showing, but it's this signature of higher self, or even our subconscious mind that's really trying to get you to peek through the veil. We've put this veil in our life that separates us from everything around us and all of our experiences, which is very self-imposed, right? We've done it ourselves, but it's also very self-overcome. We can choose to remove that. And that's how we unlock our potential, guys. That's how we unlock our gifts and our zone of genius. And that actually is what connects our heart and our mind. And I can promise you that the heart and the brain consciousness is the highest form of wisdom. This is actually where you can think with both your heart and your mind. And yes, guys, you can think with your heart. There's actually studies. There's a little brain that sits actually at the top of your heart. There's so much science in this. This is a whole brand new podcast. But we can actually think with our heart. And when we start to operate from that place, we understand that we are all connected. I think an eye for an eye, do you know what I think it means? It's not like you cut off my hand, I cut off yours. What it really means is if I hurt you, I'm hurting me. If I speak poorly of myself, I'm speaking poorly of you. And this is when you really understand that everything around you is an expression of self. It's happening through you. And the nature of this beautiful intelligence that's around us has divinely orchestrated it so that you remember who you are and why you're here.
Yeah, I think the spirituality aspect of that is exactly what you're talking about. If you speak illy about somebody else, not only are you hurting them, but what comes back to you is hurt and pain.
Absolutely.
When you're doing 100%. The things that you're talking about, the internal freedom is what you find. There's so many people living life in quiet desperation, yearning. And I don't care what you could buy. I don't care how much success you've had professionally. Yearning to be able to find this internal freedom that only comes with self-awareness, that only comes with boundaries, like Tara talked about, right? Who's your circle? Do you set boundaries with the people who are energy vampires and bring people in who will lift you up? Not that you don't support each other on a rough day. You know, we talked about boundaries in episode 5 of this for an hour and could have went for 10 hours. You and I could talk about that forever. How do you end up being kind to yourself? The third thing you talked about, I know as a man, like there was no self-compassion, like self-care.
That's right.
That ain't for men. That ain't what we do, especially a 20-year military guy. And, you know, I was hard. I didn't cry. I took pride in that. And when you realize, like, the true strength is in your vulnerability, and only in your vulnerability can you really be kind to yourself. Do you unlock the freedom? And then the self-talk piece. I wouldn't do no affirmations, please. Dude, I ain't got no time for that. I'm doing an affirmation for. What I realized is the words we say to ourselves are powerful. It's crazy how much we can give somebody, like speak life into other people, but we can't do it to ourselves.
Is that not crazy?
It's crazy. And we just instead, it's negative self-talk to us. It's not even no self-talk. It's negative self-talk. And you'd be surprised how many people, when I go do my talks and I do this part where I have everybody stand up and we do affirmations and I can see people in the audience. You know, I am not alone. I am powerful. It's not my fault. And people won't say the things that they don't believe. even though a room full of people around them are. Yep. They feel lonely in a room full of people because they have this negative self-talk. They sit in the victim mindset because they haven't healed. That's what healing allows you to do. But in order to heal and maximize your potential, how you talk to yourself, like you said, really 3 and 4 are the most important ones out of that. Yeah. Because 3 and 4 are about you. And ultimately, the better you feel, the more freedom you feel, the happier you feel, changes everything around you, from your relationships to your outward success and professionally to just how you move around the world and what you attract into your space. So I hope that you guys took down those 4 things Tara talked about. If not, rewind it. Go back and really listen to what she's saying in those moments, because it seems simple to do, but the results of this, the beauties of the simplicity, but the results are ultra profound in what it will do for you in your life.
Absolutely. And just before you move on, because you said something very, very important. So I've seen you where you've had people stand up. It's an incredible experience.
You get to be there firsthand.
So when people come to me and they're like, I'm trying to manifest in my life, Tara, and you guys know my story. I won the lottery here, and I do give it to the power of belief. And this is what ties in with affirmations. I know people who put Post-it notes all over their mirrors. They got them in their car. They got them in the fridge. Yeah. And they're just it's not working. And the reason why it's not working, this is why 3 and 4 are powerful, is you got to go back to your belief system. Because if you don't believe that you're beautiful, if you don't believe that you're worthy, if you don't believe that you deserve a seat at that table or that opportunity is for you, you're only going to experience more of that. And so this is why affirmations don't work for everybody, because they don't actually believe it. And so I need you to become the proof seeker. I need you to go back to your belief system and look for the proof of why you're not worthy. Why are you not smart enough, educated enough? Why do you not deserve a seat at that table? And I guarantee you're not going to be able to find it. It's not factual. And so if we don't do that work, you're not going to have that freedom. But I promise you, if you do the work, life changes, guys, and big epiphanies start to happen. And then all of a sudden, we were told as kids, right, that there's a finite amount of seats on this universe. That's a lie. That's the biggest lie ever sold to us. There is infinite amount of seats and possibilities just waiting for you to show up. And when you show up, you'll notice the doors of opportunity just start to fling open everywhere. And even like for me, a prime example, this year alone, the amount of opportunities that have been coming my way and the doors, even just up to 5 minutes before recording this, I don't even know where they're coming from, but I do know that it's because I am showing up in my light, my DNA, my experience, and I understand now that I was looking at everything wrong and that my window of perspective has changed. Sometimes we think we're right and we are so wrong.
Well, and you took action.
Hello, and action. Yeah, that's another huge facet. You can't just will that stuff to you. You actually have to. The universe responds to action. You can't just sit at home and be like, oh, I'm going to manifest a handsome man and I'm going to get married and live in a castle. Well, if you don't put in the effort, the action, the energy, the universe ain't going to give it to you, sweetheart.
Well, I really want to thank you for coming on today, Tara, and I really hope the listeners took notes, because you dropped some huge truth bombs and some real golden nuggets that is so crucial to living in your purpose and living in happiness. And I hope you guys realize, like, she couldn't get to where she's at without vulnerability, which we're going to talk about next week. And I mean, you just can't have this kind of self-awareness and that kind of connection with people if you're not willing to be vulnerable with whatever has happened to you in your life and your story. Yeah. And she, like I said, she's a true epitome of having that vulnerability and having that courage to share what's happened to her. And that has allowed her to live in her purpose and have true freedom and peace and happiness. We can't do it without that.
You got it.
Okay, Tara. So people are going to listen to this and be like, where the heck can I find Tara Murney at? So I'm going to give you a second here in just a minute to tell people where they can find you. But I want to talk about, your mastermind. You're free. My favorite 4-letter F word, free mastermind. I love that because it just really shows your heart. And so for those of you guys out there listening who are tired of being stuck behind these limiting beliefs and these boundaries that you put on yourself that you don't allow yourself to move forward, these expectations that you can't seem to get past, you want to expand your comfort zone. You want to feel seen, heard, and valued as the beautiful human being that you really are. Tara can help you unlock those gifts from the pain that you've been through so that you can step through your life and be triumphant, just like all of us have on this podcast today. So Tara, why don't you talk about, if you want to drop anything else about the masterclass, awesome. And then definitely tell people where they can find you, because I know there's people listening that are going to be looking for you specifically.
You're awesome. So I brought back this masterclass because everybody wanted me to. So it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours. You have to give me of your time, but I promise you I will over deliver. And what we're really going to cover and work through is your identity, not your shelf identity, but I'm going to teach you how to find your core identity. And we're also going to talk about intuition, because unbeknownst to most of us, and we've discussed this before, you don't just have your very binary basic gut instinct. We actually have 4 levels. We have a heart base, we have a universal, and we have this like connected to the universe one. And so I'm going to show people how to unlock that, because through those levels of GPS, you get to really choose where to go in life and to really learn, like it's infinite. So that's a whole new topic, but I don't usually live too much on Facebook and Instagram recently. I do live on LinkedIn land. I'm not sure if my website will be available when you put out this podcast, because I did hire a UK company to revamp it with the G100, all the new lanes of interest and focus. So the best way to reach out to me is go find me on LinkedIn. It's just Tara Murney, and send me a DM and just put in Walt or put in Steph, and I will know where you're coming from. I will be holding this masterclass in 2 weeks on a Friday, so it gives you ample time. Like I said, an hour and a half, 2 hours. I really hope that you show up and take the opportunity to bet on yourself, because we are always one decision away from changing our entire life. It is the life that you sit at home in bed at night and dream of. And it just requires you to take the action that Walt's talking about. So it's absolutely free. There's no strings attached, but it's about 2 hours of your time. But I'm going to jam it full of great stuff, guys, with actual like strategies and tools, a whole bunch that you can implement. And you can even start implementing even that night or the very next day. Remember, we all have magic in us, right? That nitrogen and hydrogen. And I just want to remind you that it's in your veins, every single one of you. And Walt, you're probably so sick of me saying this, but truth is your chance of being here is 1 in 400 trillion. So do not think that you're not important, that you do not have gifts, that you do not have this zone of genius. And I just really want to show people how to unlock that.
Well, I love it. So Tara, my warrior sister right there, thank you so much for joining us. I think, you know, if you're sitting out there and you're listening to this and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you just feel like that internal freedom is just out of reach, well, you got a choice. You have a choice whether you're going to sit in the quiet desperation you've been living in, whether you're going to continue to make excuses for yourself, or whether you're going to do something different to get something you never have. We're giving you an opportunity to do that with Tara. And even if you don't do her masterclass, I hope you're taking things away that you can execute and implement on here. This is why we do what we do. So, Tara, thank you so much for joining us. I just appreciate you so much.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm super grateful, as always. I think you guys are a phenomenal pair. And you come in vulnerability. I love what you said, Steph, because that vulnerability to all your listeners is really what's going to change your life. And so I encourage everybody to start showing up. And I look so forward to seeing all the podcasts you guys put out there, because you guys are always dropping such gems. And if just one person, one listener takes only one thing away and it changes their life, that's what legacy, that's what impact is. And that's what we're meant to do as human beings. So thanks so much for having me, guys.
I love it. And you know, you said the magic word, vulnerability.
Yep.
Join us next week as Steph and I discuss the power of vulnerability, and we get into our own journeys of self-discovery, of how we really embraced this life skill to find happiness we didn't even know that we missed out on.
Oh, I love it.
And women, you ladies have this superpower of vulnerability. It's so beautiful to watch. Fellas, like most of you, I didn't embrace my vulnerability until I really got brought to my knees and I had a moment where I had a choice whether to embrace it or not. And what it's done for me has changed my entire life and led me into the purpose of what I'm doing today. So you guys don't want to miss out on that. But as always, look, we can't grow without you helping share this message with other people. And so if this episode really hit home with you,
share this episode with someone who needs it. Please.
Yes.
Find the one. We don't have to save the world overnight. It's not realistic. Find the one. This is about building the best version of you, like we say in our intro. Today, it's you. Yeah. Who is it going to be tomorrow? Because you listen to this and you're going to share it with them. You want to be the change? Start by helping the person next to you take action like you're doing today. So again, join us on YouTube and Instagram. Super easy at Legacy Warrior Podcast. I try to make it as easy as possible so that I don't forget. We'd love to hear what you think of the show. So jump on there, subscribe.
We love feedback.
Yeah, tell us what you think. What do you want to hear about? What kind of a guest do you want to bring on?
We can't serve you if we don't know what you need. So please share that with us.
I love it. And so until the next time, stay in the arena of life, keep fighting, taking steps forward, and
leave this world a little bit better than you found it.
See you next week.